Hey folks. So, like a lot of us, I just finished listening to The Age of Umbra, an actual play podcast by Critical Role, and they're running the new TTRPG system of DaggerHeart. And I have to say, I love the sound of this system, and I thought it would be really good to go over some of the core mechanics and to build a character together. And so that's what we're going to be doing today on Dragons and Dice. Let's check it out. Welcome to Dragons and Dice. The new DaggerHeart book, it looks amazing. And it's basically the player's handbook, the dungeon master's guide, and the monster manual all rolled into a beautiful 400-page plus book full of artwork, tips, printable sheets, and all the player cards that you'll need. And it also has really good indexes in it, which is always helpful when you're learning a new system and need to look something up. And I think for this breakdown, we will build a character together as we go through that part of the book so that we can get a feel for that and then do like a 1,000 foot flyover of the basic mechanics and what all you get from this book when you buy it. Also, this is just my take on it, and it isn't a sponsored endorsement or anything like that, but I really do like this system, and I'm looking really forward to running some in the near future. So DaggerHeart is going to be a TTRPG just like D&D, and it's going to share a lot of similarities, but it does have a bunch of tweaks. First up, it's going to be more fluid and more roleplay forward than the majority of your D&D games will be, and we'll see all this reflected in the rules. It's best with a DM and 2 to 5 players, just kind of like D&D is, and it uses the same set of dice with one exception. You need 2 differently colored D12 dice, and these are going to be your hope and your fear dice for your duality dice, and that's the mechanic that the players will use for this entire system. The game masters, they will be using the standard, good old D20s, and that's one of the first big changes is it's a 2D12 system for almost everything the players do. Most of the introduction in this book is about how the game is meant to be collaborative storytelling between the GM and the players, and then it's chock full of great ways to go about doing that as a player and then facilitating that as the GM. And even if you've been playing and GMing for years, it's always nice to get a refresher on these like core tenets of gaming. Make it fun, make it safe and exciting, and always look for ways to spotlight your companions or players, and then to tell a cool story as you collaboratively build this world and do the adventuring through it. Chapter 1 is going to be about preparing for that adventure. And like D&D, it has an overview of the realms. The ones they have in this book are the mortal realms, which coincides with the material plane in D&D. The hollows above, which is like Celestia, the circles below. And this one seems to be kind of like a combo of the 9 hells and the abyss, so basically not a fun place to be. And then the realms beyond, and those are going to coincide with the far realms. Then it goes into character creation, and I am so stoked about the character creation in this system. I love making characters, and I love the way this system goes about it. So this core book, it starts off with 9 classes, and each of those have 2 subclasses. And I know they're already playtesting more, because there's not a warlock in this one, but I've seen playtest for them, and they look really cool also. But let's check out the 9 classes that they have and what the general feel for each of those 2 subclasses are going to be inside those 9 classes. First up, you're going to have the Bard, and the 2 subclasses that you get here are the Troubadour or the Wordsmith. The Troubadour is kind of going to be like a buffer and party support magic, and the Wordsmith looks to have kind of like, you're going to be like the party's face. You're going to be really good at talking people into doing what you want. Then the next class is the Druid, and you have the Warden of Elements, and this is going to be DPS / support magic, and Druids can wild shape like in D&D. And then you're going to have the Warden of Renewal, and this one's going to be a lot more of the healer-based Druid. You have a Guardian, and they have the Stalwart, which is going to be the tank version, and then you have Vengeance, and that's going to be kind of like a counter-attacker DPS. Next class is a Ranger. You get the Beastbound, and these are going to be like Beastmaster Rangers. You get a pet. Or you get the Wayfinder, and these are going to kind of be a little bit more of the stalkery, sneaky DPS Rangers. Next class is a Rogue. You have the Nightwalker, and these are really neat. They do like a bunch of shadow magic and are the like sneaky shadow strikers. Or you have the Syndicate, and these are going to be people who have like criminal connections, and they're going to be really good at the nefarious parts of things that are going to be happening through your campaign. After that, you have the Seraph, and you get the Winged Sentinel. That one works kind of like a cleric paladin combo for like support slash tank. Or you have the Divine Wielder, which seems to be more of the like melee attacker. And then you have the Sorcerer, and you can get the Elemental Origin, and you get to pick a element that you're going to be really adept with. Or you can be the Primal Origin, and that's going to be someone who's really good at manipulating their casters. Like the Primal Origin has a very meta magic feel to it. And then you can be a Warrior, and you get the Call of the Brave, and this bases off of what the enemy does and how you react to it. Or you can have the Call of the Slayer, and they're going to be like a really strong melee attacker. And then you have Wizard, and they're the School of Knowledge and the School of War, and Knowledge is going to be kind of like your more supporty wizard. And then if you want to blow crap up, School of War, it's right in the name, you get to kill a bunch of stuff. And so since we're going to build a character along as we go, I want to go with caster DPS, and I like the idea of damage casters that have like a lot of like ability to manipulate their magic. And so I want to go with a Primal Origin Sorcerer. And so I'm going to pull out Ticonderosa. We'll print a character sheet off, which are free on the DaggerHeart site, which is also really nice. And we'll get to it. I may do an episode later where I break down all the classes and subclasses, but for this one, let's just do one as an example, because that's a lot to put in the whole game overview with each of the subclasses going through them. So since I'm going to go Sorcerer, I'll go over what like a normal class looks like for a Sorcerer starting off. And at level 1, we get class features, and for Sorcerers, we get Arcane Sense, which basically lets us detect magic in close range. We get Minor Illusion, which takes a spellcast roll of 10, and that's one of the interesting things. A lot of the spellcast rolls on like what the DC to succeed will be built right into the actual spell itself. So if you're casting Minor Illusion, you make a spellcast roll, it's a 10, you're ready to go. The DM doesn't have to give you the DC for that. There's a lot of those built in. It's a really nice way that this game does about streamlining the game. We get Minor Illusion, and we can cast that in close range. Or we get Channel Raw Power, which lets us, once per long rest, drop a domain card from our loadout. And we'll go over all this in a little bit, what our domain cards are and what loadouts are. And we either gain hope equal to the card's level or enhance a spell that deals damage by twice that card's level. And that's what we get for kicking it off as a Sorcerer. And the next thing we get to pick when we're making a character is our heritage. And this is going to be made up by 2 different things. Our species, like Goliath, Halfling, Orc, Human, etc. And then where we were raised. And I like this because, it gives you a lot more variety, because all Wood Elves might not have grown up in the woods. They may have grew up in the city. And it just gives you a really nice flexibility, because you pick your species and then you kind of pick where you're from. So let's go through these species, and they give you a lot of them starting out, which I really like, because everyone has an idea for something they want to play. And each species comes with 2 like traits that they're going to add to your player sheet, and that's just stuff that you get to do from then on. And so we'll start off with the Clank, and these kind of coincide with the Warforged from D&D. It gets efficient, and that lets you take a long rest when you take a short rest. So that's really nice in this game, because you get long rest abilities instead of short rest, because those are different. And it gets Purposeful Design, and that lets you add a +1 to one of your experiences at character creation. We have Dracona, and these are like Dragonborn. You get skills that when you would take severe damage, you can mark a stress and lose 1 less HP. And you get an Elemental Breath that does D8 magic damage using your proficiency. They have Dwarves, and those get Thick Skin, and when you take a minor damage, you can mark 2 stress instead of taking an HP hit. And they get Increased Fortitude, which they can spend 3 hope to have the physical incoming damage halved. They're Elves, and they get Quick Reaction. They can mark a stress to gain advantage on a reaction roll. And Celestial Trance. During a rest, you can choose 1 additional downtime move. They have Fairies, And you get Luck Bender. Once per session, you can spend 3 hope to re-roll your duality die. And Wings. And while you're flying, you can mark a stress after your attack to gain +2 to your evasion. There are Fawns, and they get the Caprine Leap. And you can leap anywhere within close range with normal movement. And they get Kick. And that is when you succeed on an attack within melee range, you can mark a stress and kick off of that creature, dealing an extra 2d6 and knocking them back, or you're knocking yourself back. There are Fearbolgs, and you get Charge, and when you succeed on an agility roll to move from far or very far into melee range, you can mark a stress and deal 1d12 physical damage to all targets in melee range. And Unshakable. When you would mark a stress, roll a d6, and on a 6, you don't have to mark it. There are Fungal, and these kind of coincide with the Myconids. They're little mushroom people. You get the Fungal Network, and you get to make an Instinct roll of 12, and you can use your mycelial array to speak with others of your ancestry across any distance. And you get Death Connection, and while touching a corpse that recently died, you can mark a stress and extract the memory related to a specific emotion or sensation that they had. There are Galapa, and these look a lot like turtles, and you get a shell, and you gain bonus to damage to your threshold equal to your proficiency, and then they get Retract, and you can mark a stress to retract into your shell, and you have resistance to physical damage. You have disadvantage on attack rolls, though, and you can't move. There are Giants, and these are kind of akin to Goliaths. You get Endurance, and you gain an extra HP slot at character creation. And then you get Reach, and you can treat any weapon, ability, spell, or feature that has melee range as very close range instead. There are Goblins, and you get Sure-Footed. You ignore disadvantage on agility rolls. And you also get Danger Sense, where once per rest, you can mark a stress to force an adversary to re-roll an attack against you or an ally that's in very close range. There are Halflings. You get Luckbringer. And at the start of each session, everyone in your party gains a hope. And you get Internal Compass, which is when you roll a 1 on your hope die, you can re-roll it. There are Humans, and you get High Stamina. You gain an additional stress slot at character creation. And you get Adaptability, and when you fail a roll that utilized one of your experiences, you can mark a stress to re-roll that. They're Infernus, and these kind of coincide with Tieflings. They are Fearless. When you roll with Fear, you can mark 2 stress to change it to a roll with Hope instead. That could be really useful in a clutch situation. And then you get the Dread Visage, and you have advantage on rolls to intimidate hostile creatures. They're Katari, and these are feline creatures. They're kind of like Tabaxi. You get Feline Instinct. When you make a agility roll, you can spend 2 hope to re-roll your hope die. And you get Retracting Claws. You can make an agility roll to scratch a target within melee range, and on a success, they become temporarily vulnerable. You can be an Orc, and you get Sturdy. And when you have 1 HP remaining, attacks against you have disadvantage. And then you get a Tusk attack, and when you succeed on an attack against the target in melee range, you can spend a hope to gore them with your Tusk and deal an extra 1d6 damage. There are Ribbits, and these are little frogmen. They kind of coincide with Bullywugs. You get Amphibious, where you can breathe and move naturally underwater, and a Long Tongue. You can grab onto within close range and can mark a stress to use your tongue as a finesse weapon, dealing d12 damage with your proficiencies. And then finally, the last class is the Simian, and that are kind of like monkey people. And you have a Natural Climber. You have advantage on agility rolls that are for climbing or for balancing. And then you get Nimble, and that lets you add a +1 to your evasion. You also have the option here of doing a custom species. So if you ever want to be like an elf and a dwarf put together, you can now, and I think that's really cool. It makes a lot of sense because instead of having like half elves and half orcs, you could have halves of everything in D&D worlds or in DaggerHeart worlds. And so it's really neat because now what you do is you get to pick the first feature from one species and the second feature from the other species. And when you look at the species, this makes good sense. A lot of the damagey and like better abilities are the second one, and a lot of the more utility / mobility features are on the first one. So it makes sense not to be able to combine like an orc's tusk and the Ribbit's Tongue if you were an Orc Ribbit combo. So you wouldn't get to like super pile on damage and break the game that way, but you do get the flavor you're looking for. So for a little build along character, I really want to go with the Furbog. I love that option of every time I mark a stress, rolling a d6, and if it's a 6, that's basically 17% of the time not having to mark that stress. That's going to be really helpful for a sorcerer because a lot of their abilities are stress based for the primal origin that we're going with for our subclass. So the next part of our heritage, though, is made up by the community we grew up in, and each one of these comes with its own little perk. Let's check those out. First up's the Highborns. These are going to be like the nobles and like dignitaries of your societies. And the ability you get is called Privilege, and you have advantage on rolls to deal with nobles, negotiate prices, or to leverage your reputation to get the things you need. The next one's the Loreborn, and these are going to be like the sages, and the ability you have is well read. You have advantage on rolls that involve history, culture, or politics. They're the Orderborn, and these are kind of based around discipline and faith. And you get to ability called Dedicated. You record 3 sayings or values that were instilled with you, and once per rest, when you describe how you're embodying one of these values, you can roll a d20 as your hope die. You have the Ridgeborn, and these are kind of like mountain folk. The ability you get is Steady, and you have advantage on rolls to traverse dangerous cliffs and ledges, navigate harsh environments, and for the use of your survival skills. You have the Seaborn, and these are ocean folk, and they know the tide. And when you roll with fear, you can place a token on your community card, and you can have a number of tokens on that card equal to your level. Before you roll an action roll, you can spend as many of those tokens as you want to gain a +1 bonus. There are Slyborn, and these would be kind of like the street urchins. You grew up on the streets, and the ability you get is Scoundrel, and you have advantage on rolls to negotiate with criminals, detect lies, or find safe houses or hiding places. They're the Underborn. These folks are going to be the cave dwellers, and you get low light living. And when in shadowy and dark places, you have advantage on rolls to hide, investigate, or see details that are in those low light areas. And then there's the Wonderborn, and these are kind of going to be the gypsy-esque type groups of people, and you get a nomadic pack. And with that pack, once per session, you can spend a hope, reach into your pack, and pull out a mundane item that is useful for your situation, but you do have to work that out with the DM. You can't just be like, and oh, I forgot my crowbar, but it's in my pack. So you have to talk about that with the DM before you get to do that, though. There are the Wildborn, and these would be kind of like the deep woods people. You get Lightfoot as your ability, and your movement is naturally silent, and you have advantage to move without being heard. So this makes up the second part of your heritage. And to finish out our Furbog Sorcerer, I think I'm going to pick the Wonderborn. Furbog in this setting are bovine kin, and I think he's going to be like a tall guy with bull horns, and I like the flavor of he travels a ton seeking out like magical trinkets and items to help with his natural magic that he's trying to come to terms with. So we got a class, and we've got our heritage, which is our species and where we were raised at. And now we get to assign our character traits. And this one is a bit different since DaggerHeart has its own version of standard array that all characters use for starting out. It still has 6 abilities, although there is no con stat. That is based off of, your HP is based off of what class you're playing. But the 6 abilities that you get are agility. This will be like your dex based in D&D. It'll be like to sprint, leap, and maneuver. There's your strength stat, and this will be to lift, smash, grapple, strength-based skills. There's finesse, and this is kind of like a skill trait. It gives you control, hide, tinker, that type sort of things. There's instinct. That kind of coincides with what wisdom would be in D&D. It's to perceive, sense, and navigate. There's presence. This is going to be kind of like what your charisma is in D&D. You get for charming, performing, or deceiving people. And then there's knowledge, and that's going to be intelligence on the D&D side. And that's to like recall, analyze, and comprehend. The way these skills work is that when you build your character, you get a +2, a +1, a +1, a 0, and a -1. And you put those on any of those 6 stats wherever you would like to have them. It is really nice starting out when you print off your character sheets. It has a character guide that comes with each of the classes that will give you your suggested stat alignment, starting weapon, and armor. I think this is really handy because starting out, I didn't know that sorcerers are going to be instinct casters. I mean, I listened to actual play, but it hasn't gotten too much into that. And so it's really nice that they have a guide for all of us starting out, since it's a brand new system that's going to give you, hey, this is the optimal place to put your stats so that your character will work as is intended. And then it also gives you suggestions for what you should pick for your starting armor and weapons that'll, coincide and go well with what you're picking out for your character and for your class. And that's really handy. And it's just like a simple printable guide. You have it right there to start with you. And I'm sure once we all get a good handle on the mechanics, it'll be really fun to tweak those around and be like, well, I'd really kind of like to have a little strength so I can kind of combo this. But for all us noobs just getting started, it's handy to have those little go-to sheets. The next thing that comes up on our character sheet is going to be our HP and stress. And this is where DaggerHeart will differ a ton from D&D. We aren't going to have massive HP pools because of the way armor and damage work in this system. We have thresholds that are going to dictate how much HP we will lose. And this is all going to come up in a minute when we go over that system. So no one panic if you don't know what a threshold is. And then our HP is actually dictated by the class that we pick to start out. And as a sorcerer, ours is pretty low. We start off with 6 HP, and all classes start off with 6 stress. The next thing we get to do with our character creation, though, is we get to pick armor and a starting weapon. We either get a 2-handed weapon, or we get a 1-handed primary weapon and a 1-handed secondary weapon, and then everybody gets an armor. The little sheet suggests that I take a 2-handed dual staff. It has far range for attacks and does D6 plus 3 magic damage. And for the armor, I'm getting the lightest thing they have. In this game, it's called Gambeson armor, and it has damage thresholds of 5 and 11. It also has a flexible feature, which I like because it gives us a +1 to our evasion. And then the armor also has a base score, and that is 3 on this one. This number is important. That is the number of armor slots that you can mark to reduce incoming damage by 1 threshold level. Also, when you pick out your starting armor and your starting weapons, you get a full set of adventuring gear, which is basically the same as like an adventurer's pack or an explorer's pack in D&D. And then the next part that we go through on our character creation is your personal background story. And they have a handful of questions to help you answer this. But if you've done in-depth D&D character backgrounds, this will come pretty naturally to you. They're very similar. The questions that were on the suggestion sheet for my sorcerer are, what did I do that made people in my community wary of me? Who taught me to control my untamed magic, and why are they no longer able to guide me? And I have a deep fear I hide from everyone. What is it, and why does it scare me? And so those are just some like sample questions to start off with to give you a little background for what your character is going to be. So if I was going to answer those for my little furball sorcerer, I would probably flavor that first question where the majority of my clan were very physically based, and when it came to combat and the way they lived their lives, but that I had like an innate magic affinity, and that made me an outsider, and this left me ostracized from the clan, and that has made me broody and angry. And then the person who taught me, I would have this be, I used to walk away from my group to try to find some peace and to practice my magic. And one day I ran into a fairy hermit in the woods, and he started to teach me to control my powers and my anger. And it was very strange for me to be accepted by this fairy mage and not by my own people. And he taught me about like tolerance and self-control and my magic. And then the reason he's not around anymore is that he was killed in his sleep by a group of bandits, and he didn't even have anything to take. They, who knows why they did it. There was no one left. He'd killed one of them, and it was a human. And then I tracked them to their camp, and my rage got the better of me, and I exploded in like fiery sorcerer's power, and I didn't even mean to. And I don't know exactly what I meant to do, but it just all happened so fast, and they all died. And then that would be my secret that I didn't want other people to find out about, that I had this like large well of magic power and a bunch of anger with it. And it was kind of like a struggle to keep self-control and control the magic. And that would be kind of how I'd flavor this character. If I was going to answer those 3 little background questions that are on the character sheet. Now, the next part of character creation in DaggerHeart is something I geek out about so hard, because now you get to work with your DM, you get to make 2 experiences, and then in game, if you can apply those experiences to something that is going on, and this can be in combat, out of combat, reaction, wherever the experiences you have from your backstory, you can burn a luck and burn a hope, not a luck, and you get a +2 to those rolls. And then you also get to name them, which just makes it's so much fun. So, like, an example would be like if Han Solo was doing this, I can make an experience that says, I excel when the odds are against me, and I'll call it Never Tell Me the Odds. And then if I'm very outnumbered, or if I was going to have to make an attack with disadvantage, I could be like, Never Tell Me the Odds, burn a hope, and get a +2 to that roll. And since we get 2 of these, and we're using Han Solo as an example, you could say how good he is, how charismatic and how lucky he is with the ladies, and how everyone kind of goes over him. And I'm going to call this one, Who's Scruffy Looking? And then I will use this when I'm trying to persuade people that kind of have a crush on me, or that I have a crush on. And it'll be like, this one's going to be more of a charismatic type skill. And it's just a really neat way to get to add in your backgrounds where they are in-game viable, as opposed to so many of us will pick a background in D&D and it's like, oh, that's right, I was a merchant, I could negotiate with this guy for a better price. Or there's so much of the background stuff in D&D that after you get the like goodies from the very start of it, and proficiency in a couple skills or a language or a toolkit, after that you never use it again. You're never like really playing into your background. And I think by having like a mechanical reason for you to constantly bring that up, it kind of keeps your player grounded in the role play and the background of your character. And I think that's a really smart thing that DaggerHeart's done here to keep this like a role play forward game, even in combat, because now you're using your background stories to be like, oh, I'm outnumbered, but never tell me the odds. I'm going to burn a luck and get an extra 2 to this because it's really important. And I think that's really smart on their part. And I really like this part of getting to make experiences. And the best part of this is, as you level up, each time you hit a new tier, you get more experiences. And the experiences that you get later on should be based off of the adventuring you've been doing so far with your party. And so it kind of helps the group grow together, because you're going to have shared stuff now and a bunch of like more things to pull from just from your backstory. And it makes me really excited. And now we finally get to pick out some domain cards. And there are 9 domains in DaggerHeart, and each class has access to 2 of those, and these each overlap with one of the other classes. Very similar to Knights Radiance if you're a Brandon Sanderson fan. I also like to always give a shout out to Brandon Sanderson as many times as I can, just in case he ever happens to be listening and knows that I'm a big fan. But the 9 domains that you get to pick from are Arcana, and this is going to be like innate and instinctual magic. Blade, which is kind of like weapon masters. Bone, this is tactics and the body. Codex, that's going to be like intensive magical study. Grace, this is going to be like charisma based abilities. Midnight, that's going to be like shadows and secrecy. The Sage, and this is going to be like knowledge of the natural world. Splendor, and that's going to be like life and healing. And then Valor, and that'll be a domain of protection. And so these classes overlap with each of the other classes. You get 2, and so as a sorcerer, we get access to Midnight that we share with rogues, and we get access to Arcana that we share with druids. And so we get to pick 2 cards starting out, and they can be from any of those, but they have to be of the level that we're at. And since we're level 1, we just have the 3 options that are each of those. And I think for this guy, I'm going to go into like a high damage dealer. And so I want to go with some big splashy spells that do a lot of damage. I'm going to take a long range one and a short range one. So for the long one, I'm going to take Unleash Chaos. It's from the Arcane domain. It has a far range, and it's basically like a magical nuke. And then the one I want for up close and some AoE damage is from the Midnight domain, and it's called Rain of Blades, and it's like Cloud of Daggers basically type effect. And that's the 2 cards I get starting out. And then when I want to go into combat, these will be the spells I have. And then as you level up, you get 1 every time you level up. The final part of your character creation is after everyone's went through this, You get together and you work on your connections to other people in the party. Each person can ask another person a question to build like a group cohesion. And they have some examples on our character sheets, the sorcerer that we're doing right now. The 3 questions are: why do you trust me so deeply? What did I do that makes you cautious around me? And what do you keep our shared past a secret? And you don't have to use these, but they're just nice starting points, and you can come up with something else on your own. But I think it's a really neat way to basically get like a group backstory together. Like a couple people may have known each other. This person may owe that person some money. And it's like a fun way to start a group dynamic. And it's kind of like after everyone's built their backstory, it's set up to like very just organically have you build a group backstory too. And I think that's nice, especially if you're going for a role play heavy system and where you should be carrying role play through combat and through all that. It's like, oh, well, this person's my brother. So if I'm stuck with a choice to pick him or someone else, I might pick him over them. Or maybe I don't like my brother, and because he's always been mean to me, I'm going to take this opportunity to heal someone else. And it's like a neat way to build a group dynamic that's like right there on the character sheets. And I think it really kind of leans into the whole thing that DaggerHeart's doing with trying to get everyone on the role play train and working as a group to tell a really good story. That's the majority of what goes into character creation. This book has a really nice layout for each of the classes and what their subclasses get. And as we said, each class gets access to 2 of those domains. And then you get your starting evasion and HP are determined by that class. And that's all right there on the class sheet. And then each class also gets a hope feature. And this is just what it sounds like. You spend hope to do something cool. And they all have a cost of 3 hope. And that's just across the board. For example, as our sorcerers, our hope feature is called magic. And we can spend 3 hope to reroll any number of our damage die on an attack that deals magic damage. And each class has something different that's on theme for them, but that's what we get. And then we also get, our regular class features. We get that arcane sense, the minor illusion, and the channel of raw power. And the subclass I picked, I guess I didn't go over that earlier, but the starting out feature that we get as Primal Origin Sorcerer is we get Manipulate Magic. And it lets us, after we cast a spell or make an attack using a weapon that deals magic damage, we can mark a stress and either expend the spell's reach by 1 range, gain a +2 to the action roll's result, double the damage of one of our damage die of our choice, or hit an additional target in range. So it works pretty neatly with like what sorcerer points do and how meta magic works in D&D. I think that's a cool class feature for sorcerers. And so that's how you make characters in DaggerHeart. You basically go through all these steps. You do your backgrounds, you work with your GMs, you work with your partners and your players at the table with you, and then you tell a really cool story together. And I'm really excited to start building some of these characters and trying to start running some of this system, as it seems to be very role play heavy. And I thought character creation would be a good place to start, because one of the most fun things about D&D are building characters. All the ideas I have in my head for, oh, what if you had a guy that could do this and a girl that could do that, and if you were this race and did this. And I think DaggerHeart kind of expands that repertoire of having more things to build and to do. And I thought character creation would be a good place to start learning the system. The next podcast I'm going to do that's going to come out later this week, I'm going to address the core mechanics, really break down how the armor works and what the duality dice do. And so hopefully y'all can check that one out too, and we'll all get to start playing this new TTRPG here soon. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of Dragons and Dice. Thank you all for tuning in as always. You're awesome, and I appreciate your time. And I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of DaggerHeart character creation. And if you do, tune in for the next episode, as we'll break down some core mechanics and go over a little bit more of the game. And if you could, leave a like, a follow, and a comment. And better yet, tell a friend about us, as that helps with the exposure of a show. Until next time, may your GMs be kind, and may your hope dice roll high. Bye.